Hello and welcome to today's Best Ball Show. I'm your host, Matt Holzel, and I'm going to be taking you guys through a live big board draft today. Real quick, before we get started, I just want to go ahead and send out a couple links on X and YouTube so we can get some people joining in. Go ahead and send that out, and then we'll get this started. Appreciate you guys being here today. Alrighty. So before we jump into the Underdog big board tournament, I just want to say that today's episode is sponsored by Fantasy Fitness. Fantasy Fitness is a fantasy analytics website that helps you learn about players, player evaluation, team evaluation, pulls in the latest news, and with some of the paid subscriptions, you're able to integrate your fantasy rosters. If you play on Yahoo Sports, if you play on FFPC or Sleeper, you can integrate your rosters and get all sorts of help with your teams, be it some of the AI tools, stay organized with the notes, be able to see team player breakdown, bye-week breakdown, week 17 game stacks, metrics about your team from an overall rank, team, and talent score as well. And also have up-to-date injury, up-to-the-day injury news on your players. Also includes contract information. And as I mentioned, you can keep individual player notes on a per roster basis and surface those up to kind of just the top level of your dynasty squads. So definitely worth checking out. Like I said, there's a lot of free content out there on Fantasy Fitness and also some really cool paid services. So just want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, Fantasy Fitness. But with that being said, today we're here for best ball, and in particular, we're going to be doing the big board draft. We'll go ahead and discuss the criteria here for the tournament, and then we'll get into it. So for those that aren't aware, the big board is Underdog's main tournament for pre-draft NFL best ball. This is a 20-round draft where you're able to commit up to 150 entries. Each entry is $10, and there's a total of 223,200 entrants for the entire tournament. The advance rate on this tournament is 3 out of 12 for your initial pod, and then 1 out of 10 on your first repod. You have to finish first out of 10 on your second repod. And then if you make it through that cut down, you'll be in the 558 seat final for a chance at $200,000 for first, $100,000 for second, $65,000 for third, $50,000 for fourth, so on and so forth. So this is a really cool tournament on best ball, on Underdog for pre-NFL draft best ball. So we're going to go ahead and enter into this tournament and commit our $10, and we are filled. So immediately filled, which is awesome. So we'll be jumping right into the draft. It looks like we landed the 10 hole on this particular draft, and the room is full of badges outside of one player. So hopefully this is a competitive draft. Looking forward to going through some of my strategy, talking about player takes, talking about just general pricing on the board where I see maybe some players priced too high or too cheap. And yeah, also we'll discuss some of the news for those that don't know. David Montgomery was traded yesterday from the Detroit Lions to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 4th and a 7th rounder. Monty now is likely going to be the lead back down there in Houston. So looking forward to that experience, I think he'll do, pretty well. Obviously, they have some issues with the O-line, but I think that's going to move his price quite a bit. He's currently sitting around like 106 ADP, and I think he'll probably get pushed up into the 60s when it's all said and done, maybe a little bit higher. In terms of this first round, I think it's pretty well priced outside of a few things towards the back that I probably would change a little bit. Probably starting with St. Brown ahead of CD. I don't know, that one's pretty close, but I could easily, I think, make a case for St. Brown ahead of CD, given his target volume and the type of offense they run up there in Buffalo. And then I think Achane is probably a few ticks too high here too, with all the change going on down there in Miami, just the dysfunction in general down there, QB uncertainty, new coaching staff. I'm going to take some shots on Genty, probably even Jefferson and Hampton and Love before I'm taking Achane. Two picks away, go CD, St. Brown, Achane. All right, Lamb goes. So this one's pretty easy for me. I'm going to go ahead and start this off with St. Brown. See what we get here at the 1-2 turn, and then that will probably dictate my strategy here going forward a little bit. Jeremiah Love should probably be a little bit higher, and I also think here in the second round, McBride a spot or two lower, and Bowers should be up a little higher, and I could even make a case for Bowers ahead of McBride. I think with where the Raiders are, their ownership, Clint Kubiak. Okay, I'm going to take Jeremiah Love here. I think we saw his talent at the combine, if you guys were paying any attention online. 4.36 40, just absolutely elite prospect. Definitely want to get a piece of him when I can. And I think, looking at a little regression here in McBride, Neighbors is coming back from the ACL. Drake London seems to always disappoint more often than not, I should say. Henry's a little bit older. So yeah, I like Bowers probably at the top of this list here. And maybe even in front of Trey McBride. I don't see necessarily why he's going this low, given kind of my explanation about these other guys here. But let's go ahead and recap the team for those that are just joining. This is the big board presented to you by Underdog. It is a $10 buy-in, 20-round draft with 223,000 entrants and a first place prize of $200,000 for first and $100,000 for second. We started off this draft with Amon-Ra St. Brown at 10. That's about one pick past ADP, so nothing really crazy there. And then Jeremiah Love, the Notre Dame rookie prospect, we took him in the second round at pick 15. We'll go ahead and take a look at the board just to kind of see how this is laying out. Any other surprises? I think Allen going this early in the second is obviously pretty far ahead of ADP. It's clear what this guy's trying to do, get a little bit of a stack here with Buffalo, and he wasn't willing to try to get a falling Allen in the third round, so he just pulled him up in the second. Interesting process there. Not sure I would do that, but it is what it is. McCaffrey a little early here at 5, followed by Bowers. And yeah, that's pretty standard the rest of the way. Brown goes here at 25, followed by Pickens, who falls a little bit. McMillan, Tet at 27, Walker at 28, and then Irving at 29. Now, there is some news around Breece Hall today. Probably saw that he was franchise tagged there in New York, so it's going to be a lot harder for him to get out of New York this year. They're talking about a long-term deal. It doesn't make a ton of sense given where they are as an organization to pay him $14 million a year, but that's what's currently on the table unless they get a long-term deal or another team signs him and they don't match it, then they would, I guess, be owed 2 first-rounders, which is very unlikely to happen. So anyways, that's the news on Brees. He might be stuck in New York this year. We'll have to see how that goes. Price is falling a little bit. Okay, Rashi, I haven't been making that click. Kyron's fine here. Also like Garrett Wilson, but I think I'm gonna go Kyron. It's a little carries a little bit more risk, I think, but I want to get that second running back early here, and then we'll kind of just see what's left. The running backs are more scarce here, I think, before some of the tier breaks than the options here at wide receiver. So yeah, go ahead and get Garrett Wilson. And taking a lot of Zay Flowers as well, some JMO, and also been pulling Amika up a little bit too. But generally, I like all the wide receivers in this range. And I do think you kind of get a little bit of a tier break at running back, I guess, after Swift. But now that Monty went to Houston, he's probably kind of that final tier break in this range. It's kind of, we'll have to see how it plays out, but that's just a thought. Anyways, let's recap the team. Right now we have Jeremiah Love and Kyron Williams as the running backs, and then St. Brown and Garrett Wilson as the wide receivers. No quarterbacks, no tight ends through 4 rounds. Appreciate you guys being here. If you guys have any questions and you're on YouTube or Twitter, feel free to put those comments in and try to answer them in between picks. A little bit about my experience playing best ball. This is my 3rd year. First year, I want to say I did about 50 or 60 BBM drafts. Didn't really play in any of the other tournaments. And that was definitely a learning experience, trying to figure out strategy, trying to better gauge best ball profiles and spike week upside, targeting variance more than, maybe consistency, things you sort of look for, maybe more so in like redraft or dynasty format players. But yeah, nonetheless, year 1 was pretty rough. So I committed the tuition to the process of learning. And then between the first year and the second year, I did a lot more research. I followed a lot of the more successful best ball players, be it on their social media feeds, X, read a lot more articles that, some of the more advanced players had put out, players like Justin Hertzig, who's done extremely well in the best ball space, consumed a good amount of his content. Watch Ship Chasing with Pat and Davis and those guys, and really just try to understand the thought process. Going into year 2, did much better. And after I make these picks, we'll kind of talk about how last year went. So coming up on this pick, round 5, I'm not touching Scatabo. Haven't really drafted much of Judkins here, although he is out of the walking boot and they're said he's going to be ready for training camp. I just like the wide receivers in this range, and I'm really just mixing them all in. Like Brian Thomas, I think here. I like Adunze too. Get some divisional correlation, but I think, yeah, I guess I'll go Adunze. I've got the Detroit piece here with St. Brown. So, in these drafts where we're pre-schedule, I try to, match up some divisional correlation because there are some week 17 games in, that are divisional, and maybe we get lucky and it's like a Detroit-Chicago matchup or something like that. Like Tyson and Brian Thomas here. Got Brian Thomas back, so definitely going to go ahead and smash the draft button on Brian Thomas. I know he had a really rough sophomore campaign. Obviously, regressed a ton from his rookie year in terms of production, yards per route run, touchdowns, you name it. But now I feel like he's kind of slid too far, and the community might just be a little too far out on him, and he's undervalued. So, been clicking a decent amount of him. Let's go ahead and recap the team, and we'll go ahead and maybe kind of grade out these rooms initially too. Still a lot to go, but Jeremiah Love and Kyron Williams as running backs 1 and 2, and then St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Roma Dunze, Brian Thomas Jr. here for the 4 wide receivers. No tight ends or quarterbacks through 6. As for the success in year 2, so after spending a lot more time, doing a little bit more formal education, along with meeting more people in the community, doing some co-drafts and getting on some streams and just hearing other people's thought processes. I did max BBM last year, so that was 150 teams, and also played in a handful of the time box tournaments. As for BBM, I didn't make it to the 580 seat final, but I was able to get 5 teams to the final round of 16. So that's the second cutoff. You have to get through your pods and then go through 2 rounds of cutoffs. You get to the round of 16 where you have to be first out of 16 teams to get to the finals. And in that round, I had 5 teams that made it there, but they all busted in that last week. That being said, getting 5 teams to the round of 16 is difficult in and of itself to do. And I did make it into 2 finals, the Husky 2 and the Pointer time box tournaments as well. Didn't win those tournaments or place as high as I was hoping, but did get into 2 finals in those time box tournaments and had 5 teams in the round of 16 in BBM. So made a lot of strides in my drafting strategies and player evaluations, portfolio management, exposure management, those types of things. So drafting from the back, understanding the board fully, kind of knowing where the value pockets are, and over time getting building better and better teams with better structure as well. 2 picks away. So with let's see, no quarterbacks. I'm gonna go Trevor here or Alec Pierce. It's pretty close. Man, we'll go Trevor and get that matchup with Brian Thomas, and then we'll see what's left here with these wide receivers, or if we go and grab our next running back. Okay. Yeah, it's probably like Algier or Alec Pierce for me. I'm gonna go ahead and get Alec Pierce. I really like what he put on tape last year. We're getting him 8 picks past ADP. He's our 5th on this team. I think all these players have really solid best ball profiles. We've seen those big spike weeks from each of these players. 40 plus point games from Garrett Wilson, St. Brown. Haven't necessarily seen that from Odunze. Thomas has definitely been up there with some big games. And I mean, Alex Pierce put up a 2 touchdown game against San Francisco last year with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. So we know he's got it in his game as well. Let's recap this squad here in just a second. Kind of talk about what we might be doing next. All right. Trevor Lawrence as our QB1 stacked up with Brian Thomas. Jeremiah Love and Kyron as our 1 and 2 RBs, followed by St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Odunze, Thomas, and Pierce at wide receiver. Now, one thing I try not to do too early in my drafts is chase too much correlation at the cost of more talent. And I also try to keep structure out of my mind as well as much as possible, so that I'm not sort of forcing myself into drafting, a player from a particular position group in order to quote unquote maintain structure. Again, at the expense of maybe drafting players that I have, ranked higher or think will have better seasons or better production. So I do use structure, of course. By the end of the draft, I want to have a team with structure, but I don't want to be consumed by that early in the draft before we start getting into more like dart throws versus players on teams, talented players on teams with established roles, some projectable volume, things of that nature. So just something I throwing out there, for you guys in the audience. Let me know what you think about those ideas. But yeah, just some thoughts to share there. Okay, we're getting into pick 106. For me, it's pretty easy here. I'm going to go Sam Laporta. Don't have my tight end yet. We'll go Laporta. If we're fortunate enough to get Goff back, that's cool. If not, so be it. There's other good quarterbacks on the board, but probably be one of these two. Knicks goes. Are these guys going to get their third quarterback? They might, or are they going to see something else on the board they want? It's interesting. Sweet. Excuse me. Jared Goff is there. This is an easy pick for me. 8 picks past ADP. We stack him up with St. Brown and Laporta. We're getting Laporta 13 picks past ADP, and Goff 8 picks past ADP. So getting value on both those guys, even some value on St. Brown if we're being picky. And again, I'm not saying it's going to work out that way in reality, but just based on ADP relative to the pick, then when I say that's value, that's all I really mean by that. Cheaper than the market price on average. That being said, let's go ahead and recap this team. I think we're in pretty good shape. Obviously, we're going to pick things up in the running back room quickly, but like the early start there, and I think that gives you, when you get those two running backs early, that gives you some breathing room to get value at other positions where I like the player selections more, the roles and the profiles. And then you can come back here on the back half of this board and really mine some value in the running back room, tight end room as well. So with that, recap the team. Quarterbacks are Trevor Lawrence. He's stacked up with Brian Thomas, and then Jared Goff, double stacked with St. Brown and Laporta. Jeremiah Love and Kyron as our RB1 and RB2. And then outside of St. Brown, we have Garrett Wilson, Adunze Thomas, and Alec Pierce as our 5 wide receivers. Currently sitting on a 2-2-5-1 build. In this range, like a couple of the running backs, Goddard's interesting. He's a free agent. I think he'll do pretty well. Let's kind of see what the board gives us. Wow. Shakir is still on this board. I'm not going to pass up that value. I think he's the best player. And this is where I talk about not being consumed by structure. It's easy to just force myself into one of these running backs that I don't necessarily like as much as the value that I think Shakir will return. That gets us to 6. And And we'll just see what's sort of left here with these last two picks. I don't love the JCM price, but I think, maybe the threat of Breece Hall going there has been neutralized a little bit. Maybe, maybe not. They can definitely draft or bring somebody else in. I haven't been taking a lot of JCM in this range, but he has fallen 12 picks past ADP. When that happens, I'll start to look at that range. I think I would have preferred Dobbins to JCM. Neither of them are heavily involved in the passing game. They're probably both a little vulnerable in their respective backfields if that means Dobbins coming back to Denver or if he signs somewhere else. JCM is obviously, probably at risk of splitting some time with a rookie or a free agent that comes in. A lot of that we thought might have been Breece Hall. That's probably not the case anymore. So with that all being said, I'll go ahead and take JCM here, 12 picks past ADP. And I also got Shakir 14 picks past ADP. So again, I would say I'm quote unquote out of structure to an extent at this spot in the draft, but this is where you sort of make that up a little bit, and there'll be options on the table to sort of catch back up at the running back position or at the tight end position, even quarterback to some extent, depending on what's left on the table here. Other guys that I like in this range, running back wise, I do like Rachaad White. Jalen McMillan is fine. I think he could be a good piece. Not drafting any Tyreek Hill. Do like Jawan Johnson, Rashid Shaheed to an extent, although I don't really need wide receivers at this point. We'll just kind of have to see what the board gives us. Omar, Trey Judy. I know. Okay. Woody Marks is dead here at this price. I think with the new information coming in and the trade, I just don't see how you take Woody Marks at this price. He's got to drop 30, 40 spots at least for me. All right, we're going to go ahead and get Rachaad White here as our 4. I think he's very properly priced, if not underpriced here. Free agent, heavily involved in the passing game, big enough to run between the tackles, albeit he's not very efficient and lacks vision, and that shows up a lot in his yards per carry and just him running into his offensive line a lot. But I do think he does play a role on an offense, and it could be fairly significant. Okay. I think I'm going to go Jerry Judy, and that'll be my final wide receiver. That gets us 7. I see no reason to draft anymore with the investment we made and the price at the cost we invested. All but 2 picks, 5 of the 7 in the top 100, and then 2 more here almost before 150. So we're almost certainly done at wide receiver, but we'll just kind of see what the board gives us with these remaining picks. I did like Vidal there. Thought about Vidal, but I think Judy's probably a little bit safer. Let's go ahead and recap the team. So this is a 2 quarterback build so far. Trevor Lawrence, stacked up with Brian Thomas, and Jared Goff stacked up with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. We have Jeremiah Love, Kyron Williams, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and Rachaad White as our 4 running backs. And then we have 7 wide receivers, those being Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir, and Jerry Jeudy. I think that's a really, really solid wide receiver room. And then Sam Laporta as our solo tight end at this point. We are, we are into the 15th round. We'll be coming up on pick 178 for this team. Here I'll be looking at tight end and running back. For those that are just joining, this is the big board pre-NFL draft on Underdog, their main pre-draft NFL tournament. Definitely like Njoku, Dylan Sampson. We'll see. Like Sean Tucker. All right, we're going to go David Njoku here. Free agent. He'll be out of Cleveland. Hopefully he signs a relatively good contract. I think he's still fairly young in age, hyper athletic, should be a solid tight end this year, or at least for the next couple of years in the league, and will hopefully get a decent contract. I think he's a solid number 2 here behind Laporta in this room. And here I'm going to go Brian Robinson. Don't know enough about Katron Allen. I do know what Brian Robinson offers. Obviously, he's not the most explosive or efficient back, but he is a free agent. He's had a few good years there in Washington. I think he can earn a role as a number 2 and hopefully split a backfield. Maybe he goes up to Detroit with the Monty trade. That makes at least some sense. If they're going to bring in a free agent behind Gibbs, that's of course just complete conjecture on my part, but hopefully he's in a role like that where he's playing at least a reasonable amount of playing time, and hopefully it's on a good offense. I don't know that he's necessarily going to sign back on as a backup to Christian McCaffrey. So that gets us our 5th running back, and we've got probably 2 more running backs to add to this squad, and another tight end, maybe another quarterback. We'll see how it goes. We have 6 more picks, or excuse me, 5 more picks. 6, 17, 18, 4 more picks. What am I talking about? What you talking about, Willis? Appreciate y'all being here. It's been fun doing this draft with you. We'll recap the team maybe 1 or 2 more times before the end, and then we'll go maybe grade out the rooms, or at least grade out the team overall. Definitely see a few more running backs I like on this board. Devin Neal down there in New Orleans, where I think they're ascending a little bit. Rashard Smith, maybe he plays that Jerick McKinnon role. Najee and Caleb, second-year guy out of Iowa, maybe he gets it going this year. Obviously, his rookie campaign was terrible, but he is a third-rounder. So yeah, just have to kind of see how that goes. Two picks away. All right, 201. I think at this price, adding JJ as a third probably makes sense. I know there's a ton of question marks about him. I don't know if he'll even be starting, but there's some divisional correlation here with Jared Goff. Good coaching staff. Maybe he figures it out. If he is playing throughout the year in week 17, I think that's obviously good value with some of the talent at the skill positions around him. But yeah, I just don't know. The expectations there in Minnesota are probably pretty low this year, and he's probably a big part of it. I'm going to go Najee Harris here. Excuse me, Devin Neal. Najee, he's back to running. That Achilles tear happened pretty early in the season. I don't see any world where he's not on a NFL roster if he's healthy. Uh, so yeah, Najee Harris here is our sixth, and then we will have two more picks after this. Let's recap the squad. Trevor Lawrence, and he's stacked up with Brian Thomas. Jared Goff, stacked up with Amon St. Brown and Sam Laporta. The other running backs include the rookie sensation Jeremiah Love, Kyron Williams, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Rashad White, Brian Robinson, and the most recent pick, Najee Harris. Wide receivers outside of St. Brown, we have Garrett Wilson, Rome Odunze, Thomas, as I mentioned, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir, and Jerry Jeudy as our seventh. And then in the tight end room, we have Sam Laporta and David Njoku. We are 12 picks away with 2 picks to go. And right now we're sitting on a 3-6-7-2 build. I think JJ will probably start this. Well, I think he'll get competition in training camp. They're going to bring in somebody, probably a free agent, I would imagine, but maybe they draft another quarterback. They'll bring in some competition. I've heard Geno Smith. I heard, Kyler. So it could be one of those types of guys to, challenge him for that starting role. And we'll just have to see if he earns it or if he ends up being the backup. But I think at this price, with a chance to be a starter, a chance to ascend a little bit, yeah, we'll get him as a third. Maybe Kirk Cousins. All right, 4 picks away. And would like to add one more running back to get us to 7. And then we'll see what we do with the last pick. I will go Caleb Johnson here with pick 226. 13 picks past ADP. Obviously, at this part of the board, it doesn't really much matter. But that gets us our 7th. Looking for a bounce back year from him. Last year, he was going in the 60s. This year, he's essentially free. So, tacking him on as our 7th, I think that's solid. And then, sorry. We have Coop. We can add an 8th. Or, let's see, Arroyo, Ingram. I'm going to go Arroyo here. I like him for his rookie upside or second year breakout, I should say. He was a rookie last year. That gets us our 3rd, and he's kind of a swing for the fences with your last pick, low ownership type of guy. Athletic profile, 2nd rounder out of Miami. It takes time at the tight end position, especially when you're on a Super Bowl level roster. Getting playing time isn't easy. So obviously Barner was ahead of him last year. I think he can make up some ground. They might not have Shaheed back, so the passing game could get adjusted here a little bit. So getting him in as our last and our 3rd. This is a symmetrical build. 3-7-7-3, and the team is as follows. So Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, JJ McCarthy, and divisional correlation here between Detroit and Minnesota. Running backs include Jeremiah Love, Kyron Williams, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Rashad White, Brian Robinson, Najee Harris, Caleb Johnson. Wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir, and Jerry Jeudy as our 7th. And then the tight end room, Sam Laporta, David Njoku, Elijah Arroyo, with Laporta and St. Brown stacked up, double stacked with Jared Goff, and then single stack Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. It's clear to me that the strength of this team, in theory, is the wide receiver room with the early investments there and all these explosive profiles. I would also say the tight end room is solid, maybe not super strong, but I'd give that a solid, B plus with some upside built in there with Arroyo as a second year breakout candidate. I think the texture in the wide receiver room has everything you need. The running back room is the weakness of this team, I think, pretty clearly. But what I tried to do is build in, possibility for some upside with some of these late picks. Brian Thomas, Najee Harris, Caleb Johnson, they all have profiles to consolidate touches if the running backs in their respective backfields go down with injury, or these guys just end up performing really well. They have the size to consolidate carries. And then we have pass catching upside with Rashad White and Jeremiah Love, and solid, just solid, consistent performance with Kyron. And then I think we got some question marks with what's going to happen in Washington. So definitely a little bit of risk built into this room, but it has a chance, to be a strength later on in the season, depending on how these backfields shake out. And then the quarterback room, I think, is just generally solid, not amazing, but give it a B. So overall, I would give this team a solid B. Would like to have had a few more explosive players in the running back room, but outside of that, I think it's solid at the other position groups, and I think it's structured correctly to advance. And then you just got to let the cards fall where they fall. So that takes us through this big board draft. I appreciate you guys all joining. If you like what you saw today and you guys want to get notified when I'm going to be streaming my other drafts, I'll be back on tonight, most likely around 9:30, and again throughout the rest of the week. Also going to be having guests on as the summer starts to approach. But yeah, if you guys like what you saw, Give me a follow on Twitter at FantasyFitIO. And if you're on YouTube or you like to consume YouTube fantasy football, go ahead and follow me at FantasyFitnessIO, and we can engage there. But yeah, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Appreciate you guys taking the time to drop in and do a best ball draft, and we will catch up with you guys another time. Peace. Later.